Today I'm going to show you my 2013 Genesis Coupe. So you may notice that this car is lower than my standards at the bar on Thirsty Thursdays. And similar to the girls that I bring home, it's really hard to put your thumb in it.
Do you have someone or something in your life where it was like a meaningful part of your life? It was important, it was a good thing, and then just all of a sudden, you just cut it out. No, I'm not talking about like cutting someone out like you did to your parents because they emotionally berated you, but now they claim they remember that they were actually just great parents. No, I'm not talking about that sort of emotional suffering, okay? I'm not talking about anything like that, Steve. You know, that happens a lot. But something that just made a meaningful impact, but then you just kind of sort of forgot about. Maybe it was like your first 99 in RuneScape, or maybe it was when you won your first trophy in karate or soccer. You still see it, it's now dusty, and you really don't care about it anymore. But it was cool then, but just nobody gives a shit anymore at the adult social function. I'm Alex Edify on Instagram, and today we're gonna be talking about that, but in more so the car form. We're gonna be talking about who, why, and what actually happened to the Hyundai Genesis. And if you haven't heard from us in a while, call us, we miss you. Look behind us, there's spooky season, all right? Because if you're looking for wheels, tires, or suspension, and some other components now, because we're starting to offer a little bit more, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. We've also got wheel and tire packages that can get to your door in 7 days or less, plus our own in-house wheel brands, Artisa ArtFormed wheels. And if you're feeling a little bit lucky, punk, you can actually pick up some of this gear, tees, apparels, things, if you want to get entered into win a Honda S2000 that we're building right now, which is actually pretty cool. And I hit myself with my own nunchucks. Drop a comment below on what you'd like to see us talk about next in the next episode of What Happened, because it is fun and we like joking around with you in the comments. Of course, on to the Jenny Coupe. Okay, the Hyundai Genesis typically was a four-door fancy sedan. It was made by a Korean domestic version, made by our favorite used and abused car, Hyundai, okay? And they were really built for those that wanted to be a slightly more edgy than Honda. They wanted to be a slightly higher quality than some of the Infiniti lineup at a fraction of the price. However, for those that don't know, Hyundai has always had a way of making vehicles that had a high perceived value without the actual price tag. I mean, even the launch of the Hyundai Genesis was like kind of directly attacking that entire mentality. in the Southern, they just had it, they were literally just saying that it was the performance of a 5 Series with the interior of the 7 Series at the price of a 3 Series. And they were saying that publicly. They were saying that in articles. They were saying that because they wanted people to know. Now, the coupe version, the one that we love, was touted as a comparable to the Infiniti G37, and it did fairly well when it was launched. The car was able to hit the market for those that wanted a performance-oriented budget car, and at the price of starting at $25,000, that just wasn't too bad of a deal. And with a 2-liter turbo or a 3.8-liter V6, the car could kick out either 306 horsepower out of the naturally aspirated V6 or 210 horsepower out of the turbocharged 4-cylinder. Now, the first gen 4-cylinder is kind of sort of weak, all right? You need something that's gonna have a little bit more oomph to it. Okay, now something that is interesting for those fun garage factoids was that the Theta engine found in the Turbo Genesis Coupe, actually from 2009 to 2014, shares a ton of similarities with the Mitsubishi Evolution X, also known as the 10. All right, things like rods and pistons carry near identical design elements and functions, so you got that for you. And even though the 4B11T is a semi-closed deck, whereas the Theta is an open deck block, which if you remember from the past class we taught you about, the 9.5-to-1 compression was enough to get some fun power out of the smaller motor and still take a couple cues out of Mitsubishi's book on how to build a semi-okay 4-cylinder turbo. As the second iteration came into the fold though, with angrier headlights, a more unique body style so it wasn't mistaken as a G37 97% of the time, and more power that would likely make James pump for yell it.
Testify! I'm more power, baby!
I can't yell it. He's cooler at doing that than I am. It was a nice bump, and it was something that really grabbed hold in the automotive enthusiast culture because they wanted the additional power, and to get it from factory was awesome, okay? The twin scroll turbocharger with the 9-to-1 compression now made 260 horsepower, 260 foot-pounds of torque, which was practically considered, in my day and age, balla status. And for a 4-cylinder, that really wasn't too bad. The V6 would get about 345-ish horsepower, which was well received and a pretty healthy power curve for the value. Now, not
I'm having trouble hearing you.
And that was neat about the Genesis Coupe, was that it truly did attempt to attack the market with value where they wanted it. I'm not entirely sure why my watch is talking to me. I don't like it, it's scary. It came with electronic stability control, electronic back force dispersion. It came with a 6-speed manual transmission, a touchscreen infotainment system with navigation, leather interior, sunroof, and the R-Spec model. You can get things like 19-inch wheels, you get Brembo brakes, you get a torsion limited slip differential, you get factory supplied camber bolts. What? It was pretty cool. You could actually get quite a bit with the Hyundai Genesis Coupe. I mean, even though the performance R-Spec shaved weight for additional performance, which kind of get rid of some of the stuff, it was really good. Now, Brent has a Hyundai Genesis Coupe, and when it starts, it's actually a proper car with a ton of people really, truly enjoying it. And let's be clear, Hyundai has always found a way to do this in interesting platforms. It's kind of like their MO. It's what they're good at doing. The Tiburon GT was the Genesis of my time, and it was super well received because it had the same platform. It had good power, relative price, and it was just decent. The Hyundai Veloster did the same thing. It was a neat, funky, compact, sportish car that the car enthusiast that was on a budget latched onto. And then there was the Genesis, which was a level up from that even more so. And now you even have the Hyundai Veloster N, which is like a super awesome car that nobody seems to talk about. And guess what? The Genesis Coupe was a banger car. There was very little bad about it. But just like I spoke about in my ambiguous introduction, why in the Lola Bunny did it not make its way into like a third iteration? It wasn't doing terrible. It was doing all right. It wasn't doing great. But over time, it was a properly well-built car. It was hitting the Hyundai market very, very well. But Half-Life 3. So what happened to the Hyundai Genesis? Well, it's actually a little bit more than you probably think. Contrary to what popular opinion may be when it comes to car manufacturers, for people like you and people like me, car manufacturers are just trying to make money when they produce cars. Now, I know, shocking that they're trying to make money. But with Hyundai's focus as a brand mark that has always been to provide value without costing that much, they're really hitting a very narrow market segment in terms of the cars that they're trying to sell to. Because of that, they sacrifice what we would call margin for consumer value. Margin is pretty much the money that's left in your pocket at the end of the day, in the simplest of forms. Don't tell your accounting teacher that. And as the years went on, the margin on the Hyundai Genesis Coupe specifically had already a very tight market for these cars, continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller as they tried making the car better and better and better. At the same time, Hyundai had been finding continuous success with the Hyundai Genesis sedan and their mid-tier sedan offerings that were being sold throughout the mid-2010s, and the consumer market demand had been towards Hyundai wanting, or the Hyundai consumer really wanting, something more, something better, something bigger, something more expensive. However, the money that was making it from the top of the line or revenue with their existing Hyundai lineup really wasn't making it all the way down to the profit, which was at the bottom of the old balance sheet. Again, an accounting term. Not entirely sure if it's accurate, but it works for the clause. Hyundai made the choice to jump into a premier mark, taking the Genesis name and making it into its own badge in 2015 with its own car lineup. It restructured its costs and its plan, and it breathed new life into the umbrella company of Hyundai without hemorrhaging brand perception. And if you remember when Genesis was introduced, it was introduced pretty cool. It was a badass way to transition people out of thinking that the Genesis was going to be just an affordable KDM and into a high-tier car. And it worked on the front end. But one of the cars that was part of the ugly divorce was, unfortunately, the Genesis Coupe, because apparently 18-year-olds don't really meet the mark of what they wanted. The announcement of the Genesis in 2015 immediately caused concerns about their favorite KDM coupe and how in the hell it was going to stay alive. How was it that they were going to make it work in the new lineup? And the great news is, it didn't. They just didn't do it. They just said no. Without much fuss and without making too much noise, the Hyundai Genesis Coupe died with the transition of the Genesis moving into its own mark, particularly because it wasn't making that much money and enthusiasts weren't really active enough to keep the platform alive. There wasn't enough of a screaming and shouting to really keep the car going, which is one of those plagues that I think a lot of Hyundai sports cars kind of get. Same thing with Kia, same thing with a couple other platforms. But it wasn't just the transformation, it also has to do with a lot of what I would call the KDM curse, or the Korean car manufacturer curse. Now let me explain with this. Now the KDM curse is a completely made up term by Alex.fi, who also happens to be me. Where cars introduced from the Korean domestic market, those manufacturers are introducing really incredible cars around the world. They sprint onto the scene, they make quite a bit of noise, bring a serious amount of bang for buck, and then for some reason or another, the market chews it up and spits it out before going back to the cars that most people know and love, like the 3 Series, like a lot of the Infinitis, like a lot of the Toyotas and Lexuses and things like that. Now, after all, I would argue that the Genesis Coupe is better than its Infiniti counterparts in a lot of ways. days. Yet the G Series is widely more accepted than the Genesis, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that people have forgot that the Genesis can exist as an option to buy on Carvana. People just forget that that's a platform that they can go look at when they're looking at a price range between $10,000 and $20,000. And it's odd, but it happens so often. The Genesis, the Stinger, and more, they kind of fall into this trap. But even with that, and up until 2018, the Genesis Coupe, even with its death, kept being supported for the most part by the aftermarket industry until it disappeared off the face of the earth, specifically over the last couple years. And it probably shouldn't. The Hyundai Genesis Coupe is a strong platform for an entry-level enthusiast, and it brings a lot of great things to the fold if you're looking for a car that can do a little bit of everything. Now, sure, the car can be a bit rattly, and sure, the car sometimes won't start because the car desperately needs a high-pressure fuel pump. Otherwise, it just won't start, and then you just gotta sit there and turn it like this, because Brent does it all the time, and it's absolutely hilarious. But it is a decent platform. They look good when cleaned up. They have a ton of modification support from a styling perspective, and the 3.8 liter is a monster of fun if you choose to go forced induction. And even though the Genesis Coupe has suffered from this iconic sort of disappearance thing that happens to these cars, it's still a good car. Just because it disappeared doesn't mean it's a bad car. It just means that a lot of people don't talk about it anymore. I still believe that this is a car that you can pick up without too much tax, have fun, go a bit sideways with it, put a smile on your face, and only have the typical issues that come from a Hyundai or come from a Kia, which, you know, at the end of the day, is it really that bad? I mean, sure, you gotta deal with water leaks and some of the times that nothing seals correctly, or the fact that your headlights are gonna leak and you got seal issues on that. And sometimes you got lockout on your automatic transmissions because the transmissions weren't that fantastic. And then you got passenger seatbelt issues where, you know, sometimes it just didn't really want to do what it was supposed to do, which is keep a passenger attached to the seat of the car, and probably some other stuff. But hey, we can't always have perfect cars, can we? And if you want a perfect car, you're gonna spend $100,000 these days because new car market is absolutely stupid. There's no reason for cars to be expensive as they are right now, but that's an entirely different subject for an entirely different time. But let us know what you think about the Hyundai Genesis. And of course, if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension, be sure to check us out over at fitmentindustries.com. I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. We will see you later. Peace.